Hey, Jason, welcome to Free the Money. Thank you so much for joining.
Hey, Bree. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this conversation and it should be a fun one.
Yeah, a long time coming. Well,
Yes.
it's really cool to have someone from Northern California also representing Zano. I love the t-shirt.
Yes, yes,
California
yes.
has some good people in the state, not just
That's right.
lunatics. So for people who don't know you, you describe yourself online, and I love this on your website. You're an internet outlaw and an online extremist. I think that fits you pretty perfectly. I've been following you for a couple years now. And lately, you've gotten a lot of attention the past few months, which I'm so happy for you. You've done such a great job at exposing flock safety. And this is a huge, huge issue that a lot of Americans are really fired up about. And I just want to get into your background a little bit. So you're the co-founder of the Free Thought Project. And so before we go into Flock, I would just love to hear a little bit about the mission behind the Free Thought Project.
Yeah, sure. I have a tendency to be a little long-winded when it comes to this one, so I'll try to keep it
Cool.
truncated
No
as
worries.
possible. But my story is kind of unique. I wasn't raised in a family that was particularly interested in politics. I didn't grow up as a liberal or Republican or anything like that. My family didn't care about politics. There was no talk, no discussion about it. And I grew up in Santa Cruz, California, the Bay Area, which is predominantly liberal, left-leaning. And so that was kind of the overview. That was kind of the influence that I got was just, I don't know, Republicans are bad. That was basically it. So there wasn't really a lot there. But throughout my youth, I was still kind of engaged in activism here and there. I was playing in punk bands, and Santa Cruz is very much like a surf skate oriented town. So there's kind of this counterculture vibe anyway. But somewhere around Occupy Wall Street, I kind of realized like, hey, there's all this stuff going on. I don't really have any clue what politics is all about. I couldn't tell you what a Democrat is, or Republican, or any of that stuff. And I realized in the age of information, ignorance is a choice. So I had one of these things in my pocket and I was like, hey, I just need to educate myself. So around that time, I was very inspired by the Occupy Wall Street movement. And I happened to find Dr. Ron Paul. And I'm sure, like maybe some of your previous guests, or at least people in our circles, many of us were awakened to the reality of the Federal Reserve and all the corruption and cronyism and everything that was going on in government through the good doctor, Ron Paul. So that was kind of the door that opened it for me. But at the same time, I was watching these protests happening across the country, different Occupy Wall Street chapters in different cities that were kind of doing their own thing. And it kind of was alarming to me to see how heavy-handed police were, how they were throwing protesters around, brutalizing them. And to me, I was still pretty naive and ignorant at the time. I was like, what is going on? These people are here, supposed to be here to protect and serve us. That's not what they're doing. So it was shortly after that, I decided I wanted to get involved in the police accountability movement. So I created Police the Police, which is also another one of my organizations, primarily an online organization. And then about a year after that, I met Matt Agaris, the editor-in-chief for the Free Thought Project, and we kind of put our minds together and decided to create the Free Thought Project, which more or less it was a hub at one point for government accountability, police accountability. We were pretty heavy on the ending the drug war for a while there. We even dip our toe in conspiracy theories and stuff like that. But basically, it was a response to something that a lot of people were feeling. It's just kind of this growing distrust in government. And there wasn't any type of real accountability. And this is, I guess I forgot to mention back in like 2013 or so. So we basically just wanted to give people the tools to kind of question the narratives, understand their rights, and more or less just learn how to critically think for themselves. So yeah, we actually had quite a story arc too, and I'll wrap it up here soon, I'll promise. But we actually grew leaps and bounds in a very short period of time because there was such a deficit. People were hungry for this information, so we were able to accumulate about 6 million fans between 2013 and 2018. And
Wow.
towards the end of 2018, both Facebook and Twitter took us down and deplatformed us. We lost all 6 million fans in a matter of a few minutes. Both of these deplatformings were about an hour apart, and both on the same day, obviously. So it was pretty devastating. We got kneecapped by the establishment, more or less, and had to basically let go of our entire writing team, our whole staff, and start back over again. So it's been several years now since that happened, obviously. And we're still rebuilding here and there. I don't think we'll ever have quite the same reach and size audience that we once did. But, I still think we're being effective. And there's plenty more to get into with that, but I'll just wrap it up there.
No, you absolutely are being really effective. And like I said, in recent months, you've gained a lot of attention for your personal brand, yourself as Jason. But yeah, you know firsthand what censorship feels like. Obviously, you had this massive platform, you had this massive reach, and then just overnight, it was taken from you. And I think a lot of people, maybe not on the extent that you experienced it, but a lot of people have experienced that in the past, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. It seems like one of the oldest tricks, and I know you talk a lot about this on your page, is we have power arriving as the quote unquote protector, here to promise safety and security for the common person. And it really seems like they're really building the ultimate control grid. And I feel like more than ever, the average American is kind of opening their eyes to this. And, you know, this started, in my opinion, really in like the 1970s with the Bank Secrecy Act. And now along comes Flock Safety. I think they were created in 2017, if I recall. And many people would describe this as a surveillance empire. So yeah, I would just love to hear a little bit about when you discovered Flock and really like what Flock Safety is, because many people just see these cameras, but they don't really realize what information they're actually collecting.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And there is so many cameras at every stop signal and every traffic light. It's hard to really distinguish. And so I think we've been desensitized to a certain extent, but there has been an uprising against these flock cameras, as you mentioned, and rightfully so. And I'd be happy to get into that. But first and foremost, we do just need to talk about what they are, because there's still
Yeah.
a lot of people, even in our circles, even in libertarian circles and crypto circles, that just don't really know what they are. So I would say at its core, it's surveillance infrastructure disguised and marketed as public safety. And
Mhm.
so I always start with that preface, because that's kind of the mentality and the narrative that they're trying to feed us, right? So basically, these things are automated license plate readers, ALPRs. They're created by Flock Safety, that's the name of the company, and they're marketed as a safety tool to identify stolen cars, vehicles in investigations, even stuff like Amber Alerts and helping to find missing children and stuff like that. The way I try to explain it to people, I guess it's a bit of an analogy. Think of it as like having a police officer on your block, on the corner of your block. And then think about having a police officer on the corner of the entire neighborhood's block. Every few blocks, there's a cop just stationed there, taking notes, writing down who's driving by, their license plate, all that stuff. And that's basically what Flock is, except for it's digitized. And it's not only that, they're recording and tracking your vehicle through its unique identifiers, its digital fingerprint, if you will. Its color, its make, its model, its if it has dents, even if there's bumper stickers and roof racks, stuff like that. And it's basically just tracking and logging where you're going, where you've been, how long you've been there. And so Flock knows your daily routine. They know when you're going to the gym. They know when you're going to pick up your kids, if you're going to get groceries, all that kind of stuff. And so this is just one of Flock's products. There's actually more than just the camera, these license plate readers. They also have a real-time, kind of like a CCTV, what's called the Condor unit, which is a pan, tilt, zoom. And that is real-time recording. And they actually have these real-time safety centers set up where they could watch these things in real time. They also have something that's probably a little bit more concerning than these cameras on poles, which is the Flock Alpha drone.
Yeah.
It's thermal vision. It self-launches, self-recharges. It flies up to 60 miles per hour. It could actually read license plates up to 2,000 feet away. So I'm sure we'll get into this later, but everybody cutting down these things. I love you. I appreciate you. I love your intentions and your mentality, but I think there's something bigger on the agenda here when it comes to actually being able to continue tracking and surveilling us, and that's these Flock drones, unfortunately. And so, basically, police know your movement. They understand your 24/7. Every road you've taken, every path you've traveled, because these are ultimately tracking devices, and it gets a little shady and a little muddy. A little murky, if you will, with the Fourth Amendment violations. There's
Mhm.
still debates in the court as far as like if these things are even legal. There was just recently a Supreme Court case that, again, we could get into a little bit later here if you want to. But I think ultimately the part that's concerning, well, there's several, but it's the cronyism. It's kind of like this privately owned surveillance network that's expanding, oftentimes without any type of a community involvement, without any type of vote. And it's kind of this larger smart city infrastructure kind of disguised as this public safety. And eventually, if I think a lot of the conspiracy theorists' predictions are correct, it's going to be part of this larger predictive policing.
It reminds me so much of the Minority Report.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
when we talk about this being a violation of our Fourth Amendment, I was looking at some Supreme Court cases, two that are quite famous. United States versus Jones, which was in 2012, where, they put a GPS on someone's vehicle for 28 days or so. And this is obviously a violation of our Fourth Amendment. So, how is this legal when we are obviously tracking people's whereabouts? It's like the government now has GPSs on everyone's vehicles.
Well, there is no expectation of privacy in public, and that's been established, right? And so there's this, again, kind of this legal gray area here where there just hasn't been enough rulings, specifically kind of drilling down on Flock's business model. Now, you did mention Jones versus the US. There's another one, Carpenter versus the
Yeah.
US in 2018. There's probably the other one you were going to mention, but there was one more recently, I think it was about a month and a half ago, it was Chattree versus the US. And that was a Supreme Court position that held that people have a reasonable expectation of privacy in their cell phone location history, and that police conducting a Fourth Amendment search when they obtain data actually violates that. So, as of right now, because that court ruling is still so fresh and new, it doesn't seem to have really affected Flock's business model. But this is kind of where it gets interesting because, like I said, it's this kind of quasi private public partnership, much like what we saw during COVID. But this is, again, kind of a legal gray area. So one of the best defenses that we have right now, and we could, again, get into the solutions and stuff at some point, but one of the best solutions that we have to actually fixing this is FOIA requests, requesting for our local city council, the police department to actually produce the contracts and stuff like that. But activists have done this in their city, and when they've actually tried to distinguish if these cameras are public or private property, the courts come back and say, well, actually, it's public property. And so
Interesting.
what people have done is actually not only FOIA those contracts and all that information and documents relating to them actually being put up, but then they'll actually FOIA to get the video footage that the cameras are recording themselves. And when that happens, the cities panic. This has happened a handful of times so far. The cities panic and they end up just taking down all the cameras and canceling the contracts because they don't want the public to have the same access to that footage, which is kind of ironic, So,
Yeah.
but yeah, there is, I think, I think it's just a matter of time until somebody with a little bit of money maybe challenges this. And we'll see how this actually shifts the business model. But for right now, it's full steam ahead. And Flock isn't the only company making this too. They just happen to be the leader right now.
The biggest one and with
Yeah.
the most money. So as of right now, because I know obviously the police departments are using Flock cameras, are private businesses as well? Because I read online, some of their customers are private businesses and HOAs. Is there any truth to this, or is it primarily a government?
No, it is true. It is. I think primarily it is law enforcement who's getting the federal funding, or at least the federal grants to put these things up. But I think most people probably already aware that FedEx and Home Depot, or excuse me, Lowe's and Home Depot, probably the two biggest companies. Also, Kaiser Permanente, FedEx was. At one point, Forbes did a report saying they had them on the back of their trucks. Thankfully, that turned out to be incorrect, but
Yeah, I
they do have
remember
them
that.
in their parking lots. But then there's Kaiser. I think I said Kaiser. Academy Sports has them. So if you go to any Academy Sports, Simon Property Group, who happens to be the largest mall owner in the U.S. as well. And so again, I'll probably be interjecting little tidbits of solutions here. One of the things that we can do with this, at least on this private level, is we can leave reviews, we can leave ratings for these businesses and just say, hey, I'm not coming back there, I'm not going back to your Home Depot if you're going to be spying on me. And so I think that's one effective way. We vote with our dollar, we vote with our lifestyle. But yeah, it is and there is, again, another kind of issue here is that I'm a freedom advocate. I believe you're a freedom advocate too. So I'm not
Yeah.
trying to tell people what they can and can't do with their own money and what tech they can and can't own. So if it's on your private property, if you say you have a homestead or I don't know, something that you're trying to protect at your own kindergarten or private school or something like that. Like, I don't believe that inherently this technology is evil, but I think when it's funded by government, paid through tax dollars, and then put up to spy on the public, that's the part that's kind of problematic.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, if I have property or a house, I want to be able to defend and protect my property, and I have every right to have cameras on. But when you are forcing everyone to surveillance, that is not okay, like on public property. And I think that's where many Americans are super fed up. I mean, we look at China, they have cameras everywhere. Now, what is the difference between America? I hear an argument a lot, and I've heard this even from conservatives. They'll be like, well, what's the difference between, flock cameras and us being on our phone all the time? I would just love to hear your response to someone saying that they are exactly the same.
Yeah, I don't think these people are necessarily trying to always simp for the state. It's just it's the first argument that they've heard, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, it kind of makes sense. So therefore, like, I'm just going to repeat it, but it doesn't hold any water. And I think, once you start to examine why, it makes more sense. So my phone, I opt into this, right? I chose to buy this phone. I could turn it off when I
You're
want to.
consenting. Yeah.
I'm consenting, exactly. I could just decide to consent to certain apps. There's certain apps that I probably won't upload. And so I control it, and I could turn off. I can't turn off my license plate. I can't turn off these flock cameras. It's not consensual with these flock cameras, and we have a right to travel. So I know there's a big debate about driving being a privilege or whatever, but ultimately we have a right to travel. So, and our phone does track our digital activity, of course, but then again, there's ways to evade that. There's ways to just not engage with certain apps or certain types of behavior where the flock camera is going to track all your physical movements.
We're living in a world where surveillance continues to expand and privacy tools are becoming more and more important. And I know some of these tools can be really complicated, but I'm here to tell you about something that is very easy to use. Financial privacy is extremely important, and that's why I want to tell you about Zano. So Zano is a private by default cryptocurrency where users' transactions are totally confidential, unlike Bitcoin. So with Bitcoin is a public ledger where if somebody sends you money through Bitcoin, you are able to look up how much money they have in that wallet address, and you're able to see other interactions they've had. With a private cryptocurrency like Zano, this is not the case. You're not able to find out any information. And this is very important today and especially in the coming years. The co-founder of Zano was actually one of the lead developers behind CryptoNote, which was the technology behind Monero, which is pretty cool. You can actually have so many different confidential assets on Zano. I'm able to take my Bitcoin and actually wrap it into a private version that lives on Zano, so that I'm able to have all of the privacy features of Zano. I'm able to do this with a lot of other cryptocurrencies like Ethereum and Solana. And this is basically a way to wrap that asset to where it keeps the likeness of Bitcoin, meaning the value and the scarcity of Bitcoin, but it lives on Zano. This is a very, very cool feature, and I have done this with some of my Bitcoin. If you want to buy Zano, one of the most popular exchanges to buy Zano is Mexi, and I would recommend using a VPN. You can also find a full list of exchanges at zanolist.com/exchanges, and I'll have that link down below, as well as some other information about Zano.
And you got to remember that these things are also starting to pop up in very kind of questionable places.
Like the
Gun
golf
ranges, golf courses, gun ranges, dispensaries, cannabis dispensaries,
Yeah.
places where
Churches.
the government would probably want to keep an eye on people. And so by tracking, logging, monitoring all of their movements, who's to say, 20
Yeah.
days, 30 days from now, police aren't going to tap into some of those same records and try to connect the dots and ultimately use it against you. I mean, they're never going to allow us access to this footage, so it's always
Yeah.
going to be used against you one way or another.
Yeah. I saw something that was quite interesting the other day. Personally, I'm pro-life. That's my personal stance, but I do think that this was totally wrong. In Texas, a young woman, I guess, went out of state to get an abortion, and they used flock safety in order to track her and kind of figure out what she was doing. That's insane. Totally insane. And I mean, like, where I don't understand is people saw what happened during the COVID lockdowns, how we were forced to stay at home. Imagine how much worse this would be in coming years if they did that again.
Great point, Bree. And I don't feel like that's been hammered enough in our online circles. Intellectually, I don't think that's been explored enough, but I think it is very problematic. And I think if they did have this technology, let's say, well, Flock says that there's 120,000 cameras, but people I've talked to who've done more in-depth research say there's more like 200,000 of these things across the country. So imagine having, let's just put it somewhere in the middle, 150,000 of these things across the country. You know damn well that the government would have used it against us. They
Hmm.
were trying to have us, adopt these contact tracing apps,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
most people didn't, thankfully, or at least freedom-minded people didn't. But you know damn well they would be, using these cameras to track us, to log our movements, and somehow hold it against us. But you touched on something there that's important, and that's that this abuse from these systems is rampant. It's systemic across city, state, federal levels. We know of at least 100 documented cases of officers using license plate readers to stalk women, whether it be an ex-lover, an ex-wife, somebody that they just met. You mentioned the Texas abortion case.
Hmm.
I mean, these cases, these documented cases of police and law enforcement abusing these license plate readers are starting to become more commonplace than the brutality stories that we hear
Yeah.
about all the time. Like it's
Yeah.
every other day now. I think there was one cop just recently in Florida that was arrested after using the cameras 717 times to stalk his ex-wife. I mean,
Yeah.
if that's not abuse, I don't know what is. And then
Yeah.
there's the flip side of this too, if you don't mind me continuing to rant here, is that there's at least 24 documented cases where Flock algorithms have actually led to innocent people being arrested, held up
Hmm.
at gunpoint, even put in jail for a day, a week, a month. I mean, there's so many of these stories now that it's almost impossible to ignore. There's tens of thousands of improper searches with no case number or
Hmm.
justification, and on top of that, it's not just law enforcement abusing this. This is also agencies, ICE, the ATF, FBI, DHS is all accessing Flock data that cities never approved, and basically they're doing that just by tapping their contacts within their buddies that are in law enforcement and using their login credentials. And so this is becoming a real
Yeah.
issue.
I do want to get into who has ownership of this data, who is supposed to have access to it, because you're saying that now it's not even just local police having access to their jurisdiction, it's even federal employees that are possibly looking at this information and abusing it.
So one of Flock's features and one of their selling and marketing points is that they let the users highly customize their package that they choose from the Flock services. And so ultimately this stuff is a subscription, right? They're basically selling access to the data. Where in the past, police would actually go out and buy this type of infrastructure and put it up themselves, so they owned it. So again, it's that private partnership with private public. And in most cases, from what we know and from what they tell us, it's this footage is retained for about 30 days. There's been a handful of cases that they've actually extended that timeline, whether it be a specific request by like a sheriff that's doing an investigation or whatever. And there's actually shorter retention times, but ultimately they tell us it's 30 days. Now, again, we don't really have a lot of accountability or transparency from Flock, so we don't
Yeah.
know. Like this is ultimately at the behest of what they're telling us. And one of the problems with this is that there's just really no guidelines. There's no guardrails. So that's part of the reason why it's continuing to be abused by all these different agencies and everything. And so I think just recently Flock has come out because they've realized they're getting hammered online. They know that the public perception is kind of dwindling as far as the public actually believing in their business model. And so they've come out more recently and tried to shift some things, and they're just basically on this crusade to fix their image. So I haven't actually studied up on all of those specific changes that they're kind of presenting as being kind of this quick fix to provide a little bit more accountability and transparency. But from what I've gathered from other transparency activists, it's just lip service, right? It's just hollow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I was looking at a couple of their recent tweets and also looking at the comments, and they were saying that they now are going to maybe get rid of audio, because I had no idea they're actually listening
yes,
as well. And they said, oh, it's because of gunshots. This is for your safety, just in case
right.
there's. A
The
mass
flock Laban.
shooting. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's one of their products as well. I failed to mention it earlier, but it's basically a collaborative policing platform. It's sold as like this gunshot detector, but it can also analyze human voice. And I think that's the part that people thought was just maybe a little too creepy. It's one thing to have Big Brother spying on us, but to have Big Brother spying and listening to everything that we're saying and doing, I mean, that's, I'm already convinced that they've, Flock kind of figured out this business model by reading 1984. I mean, there's really
Probably.
there's no other explanation for it. But
Yeah, and then also they said that they're going to, I guess, decrease their data retention to like a week now. But the thing is, once data is collected, it's at risk for obviously like data breaches, foreign adversaries stealing this information. It seems like such a huge risk for our entire country.
yeah, no, yeah, you said it completely. And I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing the pushback that we are, is that people are starting to kind of understand the depth of which, what this whole system is really bringing, the accessibility that it's bringing to law enforcement. And I don't know, the idea that we're supposed to buy on to like, hey, it makes police's job easier, like that's the way they're selling it to us. I don't know. It doesn't sit right with me, but unfortunately, I think there is still a particular demographic
Yeah.
that does kind of believe the
I am
propaganda.
I am curious if you've seen any interviews where cops are, talking about how this has actually like decreased crime, if this is helpful to them. I've watched a few YouTubers who are, journalists interview a couple cops, and everything seemed very positive from the cops. But I'm sure there are cops as well going against this. I would assume probably in Placer County, where I am right now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it was Flock actually put out a memo more recently trying to instruct local law enforcement how to kind of deal with this PR crisis right now. And they actually said in the memo, like, you got to get ahead of this, because if you don't, people are already going to be against us, So like, you really do have to kind of set the table with the narrative, if you will. And I've seen, at least in the past day, at least 2 different or 3 different law enforcement Facebook pages who had the same exact maybe a little bit different AI generated image kind of explaining, that Flock isn't this and it is this, and it's used for crimes. And of course, we're not spying on you. Of course, we don't know any information about you. And it's so clearly just poorly done propaganda. And it is kind of, it highlights how much they're panicking right now behind the scenes. But, Flock is every month scanning about 20 billion license plates. And that's what they tell us. So it's probably more than that. And despite the marketing, they're overwhelmingly used for post-crime investigation, not prevention. And so I think that's one of the parts that we have to remember about this, is that it's not going to stop crime. It might deter it just by the idea of them being crimes. But I think researchers have found that, like, there actually has to be a risk of being caught, not just recorded on camera, for people to actually like change their mentality about committing crimes. And most departments are actually consistently showing that these ALPRs account for under 1% of the crime clearance. So that means that like roughly, 99% of the surveillance that it's collecting is on innocent people, and it's never actually going to be used. So we have to ask ourselves, like, if it's really worth it. And then if you look at something like the LAPD just recently canceling their contract with Flock, I mean, I think that's pretty huge. They're the second largest police department in the country. And they found in an internal report just after 2 months that Flock contributed to 161 false reports.
My gosh.
Right. And so who knows if they're actually going to go with a different company or something, or if they're trying to, I don't know, revamp the contract with Flock. That could be the case, but they're all kind of saying basically the same thing. And the city after city, it just depends on which city you're looking at. They're all kind of saying the same thing, that basically that these things aren't really working. There's too much of a false positive rate. We're not really seeing much of a change in the crime rates. And if anything, it's just like a small percentage, maybe even like a rounding error, where there is any type of significant change. So, and they're increasingly being used for traffic infractions as well, not just crime. So it does feel like it is a bait and switch here, and we have to be a little bit smarter than than, generally what they're telling us. And
Yeah.
I think that most people understand that their government lies to them and feeds them propaganda, but like time after time, and it's always couched in this idea of safety. They, I don't know, they just want to lean into that and feel like they're safe, I guess. So.
Yeah, I want to go back to the Bank Secrecy Act a little bit, because this is exactly what they did, decades ago. They said, we want to go after criminals, so we need to monitor what you're doing. And the bank became a police. It seems very similar now to what Flock is doing with, we want to find kidnappers. We want to be able to protect your children. And really, we're just giving up more and more of our liberties. And people always say right from the beginning, they're like, it's going to protect the common person. But at the end of the day, it's taking away more and more of your rights. And I did read something, I'm not sure if this is actually going through, but I guess this was a pitch that Flock now wants to partner with a dash cam company that's often in a lot of Ubers called Nexar.
Yeah.
That would possibly be over 350,000 rideshare vehicles that would be monitoring everywhere they're going.
Absolutely. And, this really is the beginning stages of emergent industry here. It's only expanding and increasing. We obviously know of, the company Palantir and how they're kind of swallowing up the federal government right now. But this is just the beginning stages, really. And I guess we're about 2 years, a little over 2 years into, or no, not even, right? About a year and a half into Trump's administration, but it's clear that the mask is off. There is no semblance of making America great again. What we're getting is this technocratic push on almost all fronts, whether it be the stable coins, which I'm sure, we could talk about, and
I want to get into that.
Fits into the equation. The license plate readers, it's AI data centers that will be kind of behind the scenes, kind of collaborating all this information. So there is very much an ongoing push here that is an agenda, that has been an agenda, and it's just kind of in the beginning stages. So I only imagine there's going to be more. And, again, Flock is only one of these companies, too, that are making them. Axon's also making them. Actually, Axon's CEO, Rick Smith, was the highest paid CEO in 2024. And they're basically trying to turn every police camera into an ALPR node as well. So all the body cameras, all the dash cameras that they have, it's all going to be kind of fed into this real-time crime center kind of data points as well. So every camera that the cops wear on them, the body camera, could eventually be turned into, these nodes. And that's concerning to me, especially if we're talking about getting facial recognition into these.
I was literally just going to say that.
Great mind, of course, but
as of right now, they're claiming they don't use facial recognition.
Right.
Right?
Flock, yes.
Yeah, Flock doesn't use it.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is I also read this online yesterday that, say you don't have a license plate. I know many people that drive around without a license plate, they can still identify your vehicle.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So you're not even safe from not having a license plate, or maybe a vanishing license plate.
Well,
not saying that people should have a vanishing license plate. You can get in a lot of trouble, but
no, you're right. That's part of Flock's. That's part of the tech, is that they'll read anything that's associated to your vehicle. Like I said, dents, roof racks, stickers, any of that stuff. So it's more than just a license plate. It's kind of a deceptive misnomer, actually. And there's actually even one step further than this, which is being produced by Motorola Vigilant Solutions. It's called Signal Trace, and I'm sure you're on Twitter enough where I'm sure you happen to see this. But Signal Trace is a surveillance technology that goes beyond these license plates. It basically detects the wireless signals from things like your Bluetooth devices, your wearables, your phone, your AirPods, all these things. And so
I saw your post about that.
Yeah, so it's basically going to correlate all this information together to basically put together an electronic signature. So it's going to be identifying your plate, and then it's going to be also identifying the electronics that are traveling with you. So it's just, like I said, this is just it's an emerging industry.
So
right?
Comparing America to China right now, are we about the same with surveillance?
Well, I know not all parts of China have the social credit score, but I guess that's the one thing that we're missing right now.
Yeah.
And maybe that's where the CBDC slash bait and switch stablecoin comes in,
Hmm.
because that's, and the digital ID. I think that's probably the main factor that they really have to implement first before they're able to completely turn all of this into a social credit score. But here's the problem is that these are all steps and dots that we're connecting for a larger surveillance state, police state that ultimately could lead and probably will lead to a social credit score, all being built by Jeffrey Epstein's friends, so.
So as of right now, they know where you drive. They know what you have outside your house. I even saw that possibly they're going to be driving around neighborhoods, looking if you have any violations, if you maybe need a permit for something. They know what you search if you're not using Brave browser. They know your communications. That's why, I like to use Signal. And they know what you buy. That's why, you and I are big believers in privacy coins. I know Jason and I really connected over Zano. That's how we became friends. But yeah, I guess I want to kind of get into a little bit where you think this is going with stable coins possibly being, these central bank digital currencies, and why you advocate so hard for Zano.
Yeah, well, I wrote a whole book, ebook, 3 Ways to Prepare for CBDCs. And I guess in some ways we dodged that bullet. But from everything I've read and heard and had guests on our podcast, actually, these stable coins are much worse because it's not just going to be limited to a geographical area with borders such as the CBDC would. This is going to be international. So something like a stable coin could be pitched to somebody living in Ghana or somebody living in Australia or whatever. And so basically, this is just the government and the Fed's way of kicking the can down the road to preserve and uphold the last remnants of the fiat dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And so how this all is going to tie into a larger police state, surveillance state. Well, again, the digital ID is going to be necessary. And once they actually have that, then all of our online decisions, all of our choices, our behavior is all going to be logged and monitored. And they're already starting to push for this through the age verification stuff. I mean, obviously, during COVID, there was the digital ID push, but I think there was enough of a pushback. It kind of scared them. They had to kind of reformulate their plans. And so now we're starting to see this age verification push across the board in different ways. I know Discord had a big issue with it not too long ago. And starting in January 2027, New York State as well is going to be requiring age verification for minors to have any algorithmic feeds. So I don't know. There's this weird stipulation. We don't have to get into all the details, but basically, you're going to have to upload some type of form of ID in New York to continue using the internet, and that's just the beginning of
And
this
of course,
kind of larger rollout.
adults would also have to do this. So when
Exactly.
the government claims, "Oh, we're just trying to protect your children from harmful content," no, it's affecting everyone. And at the end of the day, and I've said this, I feel if I sound like a broken record, parents need to parent their children, not the government. It's not the government's responsibility to say what somebody's child should be and shouldn't be watching.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And yeah, so there is a push for all this, and the physical infrastructure is the flock cameras. I like to say that they're the eyes, and a company like Palantir is going to be the brains. And I think there isn't a lot of evidence right now that there's a lot of cross referencing going on right now. I think there's maybe a couple of departments that are kind of utilizing both because Palantir has their pre-crime policing programs as well. And then some of the same departments are probably using Flock as well. So if you put both of those together, it's certainly not going to make for a freedom, any type of freedom in our country.
Who's the person funding Flock? Like, who's their biggest investor?
I don't have that information, although I probably should, but I do know that it was initially funded by Peter Thiel. Yeah, funny enough, through the Founders Fund. So one of many Peter Thiel's Founders Fund companies that he's invested in over the years. But
Yeah.
that should be a red flag too, right?
Yeah, because I don't know, just maybe I'm totally wrong about this, but just doing a basic search for who's the CEO of Flock, it looks like a young guy, and it's like I'm sure there's probably a lot more behind him that we're really not seeing. And I did watch a YouTube video recently where I found this so hypocritical on Flock's part, where, they're watching everyone, they're tracking us all, yet they hide their addresses online behind a bunch of like umbrella companies, whatever you call it, because they don't want any of their information public.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're totally right about that. Try finding any of their addresses to any of their corporate headquarters or any of their manufacturing plants or anything like that. You can't. And that's not the only thing that they're not transparent about as well. They hide their total camera count. That's why DeFlock.org exists and is so
Yeah.
popular, because that's one of the only places that is crowdfunded, of course, or crowdsourced, I should say. And they don't actually tell us their failure and false read rates, the wrongful stops, the searches, the arrests tied to Flock. I mean, any of this stuff. I mean, they're great at the public relations, propaganda and marketing side of things, but they're not so great about the transparency. And funny enough, I've actually tried to ask Garrett Langley, the CEO, some of this stuff when he was, and he's still on Twitter, but I just got blocked. I didn't get any type of response, nothing. He just blocked me, and I was one of many people that he blocked. And then about 2 to 3 weeks ago, they had this reversal where they were like, we're going to unblock everybody. We're actually going to open up our comments to criticism and have anybody who wants to comment. And so they're actually having some, not much, but a little bit of dialogue right now. But again, I think this is like part of the PR crisis. Like they know they have to save face,
I've seen this before where something will get a lot of attention and then, kind of the momentum dies. Do you think this is going to be the case for Flock, or do you think people are going to continue going to city council meetings, demanding that cities get rid of their contracts with Flock? Do you see that happening? Do you see that continuing?
Yes, I do. And I think this is one of the few topics that are actually uniting the country, along with data centers. And you're right. We see these things always come and go in waves. There's always some type of ebb and flow with the news cycle. And I mean, even something as serious as the Epstein files, like, it's not really being talked about as much anymore, So I can only hope and pray that it continues to be on people's radar. With that being said, I know there's almost kind of been this like counter campaign where people are like, we got to stop talking about Flock because that's the distraction. And there's these other companies that are going to come in and they're going to, and I guess somebody even dug up the fact that Trump had some stocks in Axon. And so there was this grand conspiracy that like Trump's directing all this propaganda towards Flock, and they're going to be kind of the people that, it takes the hit and the scapegoat, and then Axon's going to come in. And I don't know if I believe any of that stuff. What I would like to do is just focus on the fact that, hey, like this is an online organic grassroots movement that was spurred by online viral posts that seem to just take off and go viral. And it's very rare. We need to take the victory lap when we get it. It's very rare that people in the mainstream talk about stuff like this. I've seen local news talk about it. I've seen mainstream news talk about it. I've seen late night talk show hosts talk about it. So like, I don't know, we definitely have to take a moment to observe the situation in the moment and be like, yeah, like we've actually, we're winning in this instance anyway. And I do feel like the Overton window has shifted so much since COVID that there's just more people who are aware of these things.
I agree.
And I think, again, Palantir was like kind of on everybody's hit list, and everybody was kind of furious and frustrated with them earlier this year. But Palantir isn't on our block. They aren't on every corner of our city. So I think people are having this real visceral reaction to these things being in like physical proximity of their home, their city, their town. And that alone is kind of like ushering in this motivation and desire to take them down. Now, there are different ideas and methodologies behind how to take them down. Obviously, a lot of people are just cutting them down.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of personally with the mentality of like, by any means necessary, right? Like, this is basically the surveillance state that our kids are going to be living in and is being normalized right now. But I would say that if we want to have a little longevity and sustainability, there's probably better ways of going about it. And I am an anarchist. I don't particularly believe in the state or using the state apparatus to fix the country or society. But I do believe that in this case, kind of like the defense of voting, that we can go to our city councils, we can
Yeah.
weaponize FOIA requests.
At least
There are
it's
things that we can do.
local. It's local communities
Exactly.
coming together. Because that's another thing
Exactly.
too, where a lot of people I see online, they're like, did I vote for this? Like, how is
Yeah.
this happening? Who was behind this? Who was the one deciding this? And at the end of the day, I think people also are aware our tax dollars are the ones building this prison. It's coming right out of our pockets. And I think that's also really infuriating the public.
Right. Well, yeah, I know I alluded to it already, but the federal government is actually producing grants for this. And so, the initial costs are covered by the federal grants, but then after that, the taxpayers basically pick up the tab
Mm-hmm.
for it. According to my research, each flock camera costs about $3,000 per year. So if there are indeed 120,000 of these things in the U.S., 3,000 times 120, that's like roughly about $360 million that taxpayers are paying every year just to have themselves be spied on and surveilled by these things. Certainly there has to be a better use of our tax dollars. And I think it does kind of lend itself to this end goal of making everything observable, searchable, and linkable. Like, this is how they're going to manage populations and not just the
Exactly.
crimes.
Exactly. So one thing that we can do, and this is one reason why I created the show, is to give people alternatives, things that they can do in their daily life to have more freedom, to really kind of take back certain rights that have been lost. And that's why I love Zano and why I use Zano, is because
Yes.
it's private, it's untraceable, you can't censor it. Really, it's freedom money. And the thing is, we used to have cash, and cash is a beautiful thing because it allows for freedom of speech. It lets you be able to live your life and purchase goods and items without, being watched by the government. And we really do need a form of private digital cash, obviously, because that is essential for a free society. So yeah, tell me why you love Zano so much and why you use it, because that's obviously how we connected.
Yeah. Oh man, it really has been a lifesaver, especially after, I was foolish enough to kind of buy into Bitcoin, and it seemed to make sense. Back in the day, we thought it was private. Like, we didn't realize that our blockchains were public and accessible. So I realized, through Roger Ver and his book, that wasn't the case. It's been hijacked. And Zano has really just become my go-to. I mean, personally, the idea that there's marketplaces already set up for Zano, I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to deal with a third party. I could actually just use Zano for these transactions. The Zano Zebic MasterCard too, like, it's just so easy to reload. I'm basically, I might spend a little fiat here and there, but I'm
Yeah,
basically living off of Zano right now.
that's
Of
amazing.
course, yeah, through the MasterCard and the Zebec, and that. But there really is so many advantages, and just the fact that it's private, I don't have to worry about it being something the feds know about. It's just a
Yeah.
relief in that sense. Like, I should have privacy in my life. Zano is the one part of my life that actually gives me privacy.
And I think especially for people like you that have faced so much censorship, it is so important for journalists and people that are whistleblowers to be able to transact privately, because if somebody's able to shut off your money, you can't be in society. And it is so essential. And that's why I think once people really realize like how much worse it's going to get, people are going to come running to, privacy coins. And I mean, I use them because I believe in them, but I also think as somebody who wants to make money, I think it is like, I'm not giving any financial advice, but I also buy it because I think I can make a good profit off of Zano.
Yeah, yeah.
I think like once the market discovers that there's such a clear need for it, I am curious to see how high it's going to go.
Yeah, no, I'm right there
Yeah.
with you, and you just keep stacking.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're right, and I think the trucker protest during the COVID years is probably the best example of that. What you were
Yeah.
initially saying there is that they can and will freeze your money, and this isn't going to be solved through crypto. Unfortunately, it's going to be solved through privacy
Yeah.
uh, coins like Zano, and even Tether has been freezing funds. What is it
Oh
like?
my gosh.
A couple billion fund in
O-
Tether,
o-
probably
over
more than
four
that.
over f- over $4 billion of Tether has been frozen. If you go to the Freedom
Right.
Dollar website, you can see
That's
a
it.
live tracker of all of the wallets that they have frozen. Every day, it's like, oh, another 200,000. Oh, $1 million is frozen. It's crazy. Yeah, especially to watch it in real time, it makes it so much more real.
Right. And especially them being kind of the leader here as far as the adoption from the US government. I mean, it's
Hmm.
certainly ominous. It's not a good look. So I just hope people do their due diligence. And I think you're right. The market for privacy coins is only going to explode as more and more
Yeah.
people kind of catch wind
Yeah,
of
and
this.
the government ties to Tether. I mean, that's a whole deep dive. I did an episode a few months ago with Aaron Day, just the
Yes.
ties to Howard Lutnick and Cantor Fitzgerald's.
Yes.
It's really quite an interesting rabbit hole to go down. But yeah, definitely check out that episode if you guys are watching this. But yeah, I guess I just to wrap things up, what are some things every day that people can do to kind of take back more of their freedoms? I know you're a professional in this, so I'm sure you have some great tips.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. If you don't mind, I just want to talk about one thing also before I get
Yeah.
into that. And it just kind of wraps up kind of the bigger philosophical implications here, because I think that's the part that's kind of getting missed in all the technicality and probably half the stuff I just shared with you, which is probably important and interesting. But I think ultimately it's what's dangerous is about this is that they're quietly teaching us to accept the inversion of the tradition, one of the oldest traditions we've had in the free society, which is the presumption of innocence. Now we're all guilty until proven innocent. And for centuries, all free societies began with the premise that the individual is innocent until proven guilty, and so this mass surveillance is really flipping that on its head, and everybody's being watched, everybody's being cataloged. And so that shift should concern us. And I just hope that if nothing else I've said today, maybe that is kind of the
Yeah.
bigger picture for people to
Y-
kind of understand what's
Yeah,
going on.
because think about it. If they're tracking every move you do, they could assume you're going to commit a crime and arrest you before. That's why I brought up the Minority Report in the beginning, because it's the exact situation.
And that will always be used against you and never to your favor as well. I know I've already said that, but just something worth saying. So solutions,
Absolutely.
Bree,
Yeah, yeah.
solutions. So I know that Thomas Massey just introduced a bill to withhold all funding, federal funding for these cameras. So I guess if you're susceptible to believing in government solutions, that might be one way where this could kind of be rectified a little bit. But otherwise, I think one of the most important things we could do is just talk about these things, like this conversation we just had today. There's still a large amount of people that just don't notice, they don't care. So we do need to educate our neighbors and our friends and our family. A single neighborhood's resistance can actually be pretty effective, and it could be pretty effective in blocking the installation or getting them taken down. So but beyond that, I think I already mentioned this, but one of the best ways I've found is weaponizing FOIA requests. Most flock cameras are put up without our knowledge. Most of the time, we don't know any of the data that's behind them. We don't know if they're actually working, right? So one of the simplest questions is it's and the hardest for the officials to answer, our city officials, is like, are these cameras actually reducing crime? Are they actually reducing violent crime? And if you could kind of corner them with some of that data, then you have a great premise to really go at them, go at their necks, and be like, look, like you tell us this is for our safety, but they're not actually reducing crime. Another way you could use FOIA requests is finding when the contracts renew or before they're even signed. Unfortunately, most people don't learn about these things, like you had mentioned, until they're already up. I mean, the same
Mhm.
things happen with the data centers, right? Like there used to be zoning laws over there, like a couple blocks away, and now I got a fucking data center, in my backyard. So these flock cameras are basically the same thing. So, every contract has an expiration date. So if you can use these public requests to figure out when that is, that gives you better ammo to really prepare with your community, get involved in the fight. all that kind of stuff. So, in fact, if your audience wants to reach out to me at jasonbassler.com, I actually have a template for a FOIA request that I'd be happy to send to anybody. You just have to plug in your own city and that type of information and send it off. But otherwise, there's a few watchdog sites that are really effective. I know I already mentioned DeFlock, which is basically like a nationwide ALPR map that covers, where they're at, even if they're getting removed. And I think there's actually been an upwards of like 90 plus cities that have removed these cameras and canceled contracts. So I think for the white pill, there's evidence there that we are starting to kind of win this fight. There's also don'tgetflocked.com that maps out routes without flock cameras. So if you're willing to drive for like an extra 15, 20 minutes, generally, that's what it takes because there's so many of these things, but you could actually avoid being tracked altogether. So check out don'tgetflocked.com. But otherwise, invest in some sawzalls, guys, paintball guns. I mean, whatever you feel comfortable with, right? They are handing out felonies now for taking these things down. So you kind of have to, weigh the risks and consequences. But as I said earlier, I mean, this is infrastructure for the surveillance state. If you don't particularly want your kids to live in a surveillance state, then I wouldn't hold it against you if you were out there cutting these things down. So
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with all the drones.
Yeah,
and what people do, because where I live, people don't let drones fly over their property.
Very true. Yes.
So where can my audience go ahead and follow you and support you? Like, what's your website?
Yes. So the freethoughtproject.com is still kind of the main hub for most of my work. We're still putting out about 2 to 3 stories every day. And we're also putting out a weekly podcast. We've had so many great guests, guys. I feel like every interview we do is the best interview I've ever done. And I say this often, but I might not be the smartest guy. I might not be changing the world, but we have guests on who are. So definitely check out our podcast. It's also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean. In fact, Brie, I would love to have you on sometime soon as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Otherwise, jasonbassler.com. I have some products there. I have a Know Your Rights class that I put together, so check that out. I have a Know Your Rights kids book, Little Free Thinkers Know Your Rights, and otherwise, just any of the social medias, Twitter, Jason Bassler 1, Instagram, jason.e.bassler. And Bree, I did want to take a special moment here to say thank you to you for being such a big supporter. I know you support and subscribe to me on Twitter, and it means the world to me. You've done nothing but been helpful to try to connect me with people and having me on your show today. So yeah, I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. I mean, I love all the work you're doing. Like I said, I've followed you a couple of years now, and I think you're incredibly bright and you are changing the world. So you need to give yourself more credit. You're amazing. Yeah, guys, please subscribe to Jason. He puts in a lot of work. So the least we can do is subscribe to support him.
Thank you so much, Brie. Appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Jason. Appreciated you taking the time to talk with me.
Absolutely, Brie. Thank you so much.